We have gathered here this morning not because Marvin Hamlisch died, but because Marvin Hamlisch lived. Let this service be a celebration of his extraordinary life, as much as it is a collective expression of grief at his tragic and untimely passing. There is a story told in the Talmud. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the great sages of 2,000 years ago, one day called in his finest disciples and gave them an extraordinary charge. He said to them, "Go out, leave these halls of academia, go into the villages, into the marketplaces, observe people, and come back and tell me what is the single most important quality for a person to have in this world." The disciples went out, they mingled, they observed, they trickled back. Rabbi Eliezer said, "Ayin Tovah," a good outlook. If you have a good outlook on life, you have everything. Rabbi Yossi said, "Shachen Tov," a good neighbor. To have a good neighbor, to be a good neighbor. That's the essence of life. Rabbi Yehoshua said, "Chaver Tov," a good companion. And finally, Rabbi Elazar, the son of Harach, himself destined to be one of the great sages of the next generation, returned and said two simple monosyllabic Hebrew words: Lev Tov, a good heart. The elderly Rabbi Yochanan stroked his long white beard and smiled. And after a lengthy pause, he said, "Each of you has done well. But if I must choose one answer, I would select that of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Harach, who said a good heart, because his answer subsumes each of yours. Ayin Tovah, a good outlook. Marvin had a wonderful outlook on life. He enjoyed life. He was always turned on. There are times we'd be alone, and I would say to him, "Marvin, relax, you're not performing now. It's just the two of us." And he would look at me as if to say, "This is how I relax." I shall arrogate to the other speakers the task of recounting his many achievements and his many awards which he received justly. Suffice to say, when I first met Marvin, he was 15 years old. His mother said, "This is my son Marvin. Someday he'll be the greatest composer in Hollywood." At the time, it sounded like hubris. In retrospect, I must say, she underestimated him. He became the greatest composer in Hollywood and on Broadway, as well as a great pianist, conductor, and performer. And yet, for all of his greatness, he remained close to, dare I use the phrase, the common people. There was one time we'd gone to an exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum, and while we were admiring the works of art, two matronly women with Southern dialects called me over and said, "When you're alone with Mr. Hamlisch, please tell him how very much we appreciate his music." And I said, "Oh, would you like to meet him? Marvin, come here, you have two fans." He came over, he chatted with them, he signed their programs, he made their day. For them it was an extraordinary moment. For Marvin it was typical. Many years ago, I read an article about an Indian tribe in Patagonia, in the Argentine, that has a very rich native language with very beautiful idioms. And in this Patagonian language, when one takes leave of a very, very dear friend, he doesn't just say goodbye or see you around. He says, I like myself better when I am with you. Marvin had that quality. You didn't just enjoy him. You liked yourself better when you were with him. That is a beautiful outlook on life. Shachen Tov, a good neighbor. This world is a better place because Marvin was in it. His sense of humor was all-encompassing, as was his musical talent. The story is told in the Talmud of a great rabbi of the 3rd century, Rabbi Barachia, who one day is in the marketplace and he meets Elijah the prophet. The fact that Elijah had been dead for 1,000 years didn't throw him. He knew that Elijah walks the earth, and Elijah knows past, present, and future. So Rabbi Barachia asked Elijah, who is there here who will be my roommate in the world to come? Elijah points to a street entertainer, a juggler, a comedian. Rabbi Barachia is taken aback and says, a clown? I am the greatest scholar of the age. I shall spend eternity with a clown? What has he done to deserve that great honor? And Elijah the prophet said, he makes people laugh. It can be said of Marvin, he made people laugh. He was extraordinarily generous, not just in obvious ways, but in little ways. Whenever we would visit him, we had to be very careful to refrain from admiring something too enthusiastically. He would insist on giving it to us. Not because he didn't want it, because he wanted to make us happy. He tutored many young musicians without charge. It wasn't a professional thing. It was because he loved people and loved music. And whenever one of his students would become famous, and several did, Marvin regarded the individual as a dear colleague and never as a competitor. Shachen Tov, he was a quintessential good neighbor. Chaver Tov, a good companion. As he loves all humanity, Marvin had a profound love for his wife, Terry. The story of how they fell in love and then met is more romantic than a work of fiction I've ever encountered. But what is even more beautiful than how he fell in love is how he grew in love. His love for Terry intensified as it matured. I remember how very proud he was recently when he would phone us and tell us that Terry was awarded a research grant of academic nature. How he rejoiced in her achievements as much as in his own. Marvin was very much of a family man. He had been exceedingly close to his late parents and to his beloved sister of blessed memory. He remained close to Terry's family, to his nephew David, who is with us today, and to his cousins, and our children, and our grandchildren. He would usually manage to find time in his extraordinarily hectic schedule to share the Passover Seder or High Holy Day services with us. Whenever he would give a concert in a city where any of his cousins happened to live, he would provide us with tickets, of course, and then take us backstage afterwards to meet some of the other performers and introduce us proudly as his family. We will always treasure the memory of the time when Marvin took us to Washington, D.C. for a concert at the White House, and sat us in the front row, just 2 seats away from President and Mrs. Reagan. He was nonpartisan, it's okay. He was a chaver tov. He was a loving companion. And finally came Rabbi Elazar, the son of Arach, who said, Leiv tov, a good heart. There is a Yiddish idiom which defies translation. We say of a very special person, he is a gute neshama. A lexicon will tell you it means a good soul. No. It means infinitely more than that. It is a sublime existential concept. It means someone whose very essence is goodness. We do not use this term lightly. Marvin was ultimately a gute neshama. That is why he was so universally beloved during his all too brief lifetime. And that is why he will be so profoundly missed. A century ago, the great Hebrew poet Chaim Nachman Bialik, anticipating his own premature death, wrote his own eulogy. It is as valid at this moment as it was then. After my death, mourn me thus. There was a man, and see, he is no more. Before his time, his life was ended, and the song of his life was broken. Oh, he had one more melody, and now that melody is lost forever. Lost forever.